Hi, welcome to this presentation on IBM Spectrum Protect version 8.16 and IBM Spectrum Protect Plus version 10.12. I'm Trisha Jong, and along with my colleague Sean Sperry, we'll give you a technical update on what is new in IBM Spectrum Protect, which announced on August 24th of 2018 and GA'd on September 21st of 2018. I'll be going over the Spectrum Protect Server and Operations Center, as well as the HSM for Windows enhancements, and then I'll turn it over to Sean to go over Spectrum Protect for VE and Spectrum Protect Plus enhancements. The first enhancement I'm going to talk about is container tiering by state. This has to do with being able to take data that was originally backed up to a directory container, and after it has resided in the directory container for a certain amount of time, moving that data out to long-term cloud storage. And the reason customers want to do this is really what they want to keep on the directory container, which is usually more expensive disk, is your data that's most likely going to be requested for a restore. And then they want to move the other data, either older data or previous versions of that data, out to the cloud containers, either on-premise or off-premise cloud devices. Back in 8.15, we first introduced this capability, and at that point you could tier data specifically by age. What we're introducing in 8.16 are two things. The first is, in addition to being able to tier by age, you can also choose to tier by state. So you can choose to have data moved out that is inactive, meaning there are newer versions already out in that directory container. We're also introducing this idea of parent rules with subrules. So the important of this is you can now build rules to specifically target the type of data that's in those directory container pools, whether it's backup in archive, virtual machine, or database backups, and then choose whether you want to tier them by age, which means after that data has been in the directory container for a specific amount of days, move it out. Whether you only want to tier by state, which says only inactive objects which have been in there for a specific amount of days can be moved out to long-term storage, or whether you don't want to tier that type of data at all. So we're going to take a look at how you can set up these parent rules, which govern the entire directory container pool, and then subrules underneath that, which apply to a list of node names or virtual machine pattern match names, and give them specific rules that override what the parent rule set up. I do have a YouTube video out there, so check that out and you'll see me actually demoing this functionality. So before you set up a parent rule with subrules, you want to sit down and kind of plan out what your hierarchy of rules are going to look like. The first piece is to understand the cost and capacity of your cloud storage and which type of data you might even consider putting out on cloud storage based upon the amount of money you'll have to pay and the recovery time it'll take to bring that data back off of the cloud into your environment. The next step you need to do is take a look at the type of clients that are storing their backups inside of the directory container you're going to create a tiering rule for. Now, we do have specific suggestions for different types of data, and I do have a link to that here. I'll show you that chart here in a bit so we can walk through it. Now, if that source pool, that directory container pool that you're going to set the ruling for has all of the data in it that is going to use the same type of tiering settings, then you really only need a parent rule. However, when you create this parent rule, it's going to apply to all of the clients that have the data in that source pool. And that's regardless of client type, except if you create a subrule for those specific clients. So if you do have a source pool that has a diverse set of clients with different tiering needs, then you will want to set up subrules to go along with that parent rule. Now, a parent rule can have multiple subrules defined for it. A parent rule is for one or more directory containers. And when you add subrules to a parent rule, the operations center and command lines are going to ensure that each client you're specifying in the subrule is only a member of one parent rule or one subrule, that there's not an overlap. The only way that a client would have its data processed by two different storage tiering rules is that if it had data in different source directory pools that were assigned to different storage tiering rules itself. Now, I do suggest you start off with a simple rule that doesn't cover a lot of data, just to get your feet wet. The reason for that is once you've started tiering the data out to cloud, there is no way to untier it. There's no way to move it back into the directory. So do take baby steps when you start the tiering so that you don't accidentally tier data you didn't mean to out to the cloud. Okay, so once you've set up your plan, then you're going to go ahead and configure those parent and sub rules using either the Operation Center or the command line. And finally, you have to activate the rules because by default, those rules will be inactive. Now, this is the link I was talking about that refers to the different types of data that might be inside of a directory container pool. So for instance, you might have backup archive client data. And for that, you can either use tier by state or tier by age. You might have database, and specifically in this case, SQL, which could also be tiered either by state or age. However, if you have database data, then we say you should tier it by age for all the different types of data. Another thing, if you look at these little green think clouds, I'm going to give an example using these 4 pieces. So I'll show you how, for instance, on some Spectrum Protect for virtual environments, if you have production environments, you probably don't want to tier that data out. You probably want to leave it in the directory container, versus if you have test or development environments, which you would want to tier by age. To set up a parent rule, you're going to go into the Operations Center, click on Storage, and then Tiering Rules. And then to create a new parent rule, you're going to click plus Create Rule. That'll pop you into a screen right here where you'll see, first of all, that it's inactive. You'll want to choose the Spectrum Protect Server and then the target pool inside of that Spectrum Protect server where the data will be moved to. And it will automatically show the different on-premise and off-premise clouds that are available. And next you want to choose one or more source pools. And these will be your directory container storage pools. You'll give the rule a name, and then you'll choose one of 3 actions. You can choose all data, which means you want to tier all of the data in there based upon how old that individual data is. You can choose inactive data, which will only tier data that is inactive after it's reached a certain age. Or you can say specify by subrule, which means the parent rule is not going to do any tiering. Only the subrules will specify the tiering methodology. Finally, you'll set up an age parameter if that's applicable to your first 2 options, and you'll set up a time for when this schedule will run. Now, tiering is incremental, so if you do set up that it's only supposed to run for a certain number of hours, if that does not finish, the next time that tiering rule runs, it will pick up from where it left off. Okay, so for an example that I used in the YouTube video, let's say we have a directory container that has both backup and archive data being sent to it, SQL database backups, and virtual machine backups. So we would create a parent rule there, and in our case, I chose to do specify by subrule because I wanted these individual clients to be able to use different type of tiering options. Next, you need to create subrules. This is optional. Remember, if you only have one type of tiering required, you can just have a parent rule. So with the subrules, you will highlight the parent rule, and then you'll click on Create Subrule here inside of the Operations Center. That will prompt you for the subrule name, which you'll give, and then you can choose all data, inactive data, or no data, just like on the parent rule. And next you'll add in the clients, and either you can select one or more individual Spectrum Protect nodes, or if it is a virtual machine, you can actually type in a pattern matching and it will pull up the nodes that match that. And then you can either select all of them or just select a few of those virtual machines. So for our example, I would create 4 subrules. My first subrule would be for my backup archive clients, and I would set it so that it was inactive data that was older than 30 days for these specific backup archive clients that was being tiered out. And I would choose the backup archive client node names. I would then go back and create a new subrule, this time for my SQL clients. This would also be for data that was inactive and 30 days old. My third subrule would be for my VMware production machines. And in this case, I'm going to choose not to migrate that data, to leave it in the directory containers. And the way I'm going to match the names is by using the name matching capability over here. And my fourth rule would be for my VMware test machines. In this case, I want to migrate them, all of the data, once that data is 1 day old. So basically it goes to the directory container, and then 1 day later it's being migrated out to the cloud. And in that case, I'm also going to use VMware name matching in order to choose the test machines. Okay, so I had created a parent rule and then 4 subrules. And then don't forget to go and activate that rule so that it will actually run on a scheduled basis. If you do need to delete a rule, all you do is click that rule and then click delete inside of this Operations Center panel. You can drill down and take a look at your history and performance information on the tiering. We will show in here both the tiering workload and how much data was actually moved to the target cloud pool. And then down here in the left-hand corner, we'll show the speeds and feeds over the last 2 weeks for when we're actually doing the migrations. And the way that you would get to that is by going into the summary table of the Spectrum Protect rule itself. If you want to view or modify a rule or subrule setting, then you'll want to click on the rule name and go to the Properties tabs and then click Modify to change that. And from there, you can, for instance, change the rule that it migrates on, or how long that data stays out there, or the client nodes that are affected by that rule. You can also click the Delete Subrule button if you want to delete that subrule off. Okay, so what I just talked about was a new ability to tier data not only by age from a directory container pool out to cloud, but also by state, where if you want, you can set up a parent rule and optionally subrules to choose which client's data you want to move out to the cloud based upon either age or inactivity. The next enhancement in 8.1.6 has to do with serviceability. There is a service script out there that a lot of times our level 2 group will use called servermon, and we've decided to integrate that servermon directly into the product. And so this is basically going to be a 2-part piece. The first is we have integrated Spectrum Protect Server code where we'll actually be storing the collected trace and server health and configuration information directly in the Spectrum Protect database. But we'll also be providing as part of our code these compiled Go executables. Now in the 8.1.6 version, you do have to turn this servermon capability on. It will run continuously in the background and is currently supported on Power Linux, X Linux, and Windows. At this point, no AIX Linux or Systemz support. We will see that coming in the future. Once this information is collected, it will be zipped together and then archived in our Spectrum Protect database. We do see a negligible performance hit with the out-of-the-box options. There are some options that level 2 might have you turn on that might cause a little bit of a performance impact, but out of the box you will see negligible performance hit. Now if the server does encounter any type of problem, the customer can easily retrieve this information from the Spectrum Protect database and then send it off to level 2 support to examine. So this servermon is running in the background. The files are compressed and consolidated as arcfiles.zip and then stored in our servermon archives table, which is new inside of the Spectrum Protect database. There are 2 options on this, daily retention and weekly retention. This has to do with how long we retain daily zips as well as weekly zips. Now, in order to configure servermon in version 8.1.6 as the instant owner, the first thing you have to verify is you have a DSM_log environmental variable set and that directory has been created. Next, you'll want to take this commands.ini and servermon.ini executable and copy them over into the DSM_log-servermon directory. Finally, you want to use your setup or modify your DSM server opt file to have always on servermon yes. And then you want to make sure that the servermon is up and running. So preferably you'll make this so it runs continuously, using, for instance, the same mechanism as you do for the Spectrum Protect server, maybe as a restartable service on Windows via the systemd. Here are the options that do come with ServerMon. Level 2 wants you to turn on any of these specific ones, you can, but out of the box, ServerMon on its own will work fine. There are a couple new informational messages which will be logged in the Spectrum Protect activity log, telling about the instant directory if it does have free space available and how much. And it will also tell you the data collection archives on the ServerMon component occupy X% of the server database space. There is a tech doc out there, so do check that out if you want more information on setting up ServerMon. The next new feature, in version 8.15, we introduced security notifications for our backup archive clients, so that if we saw a 25% increase in the workload or a 25% decrease in the deduplication ratio that our backup archive clients were getting, we would send out this security notification, and we would also send out a banner warning directly into the operations center. In this 8.16 version, we've added two new enhancements. The first is the ability to turn off the security notification banner that shows up in the operations center. So you'll see this banner notification toggle, which if you don't want to see those notifications constantly popping up in the OC, you can simply toggle that off. Even when you toggle this off, the security notifications will still be logged and you'll still see them out there, but you won't get the warning flashing at the top of your OC screen. The next new piece is we've added this ability to create a security notification if we see an individual Hyper-V or VMware backup having a 25% increase in workload. Now, the reason we worry about seeing a massive increase in workload, like 25%, is a lot of times if you have some type of malware attacking your system, we will suddenly be backing up a whole bunch of newly changed files, and or we'll see a decrease in the amount of deduplication occurring because those files have been encrypted by that malware. So with the Hyper-V and VMware backups, we're looking just at the workload increase. So if we do see for the individual virtual machines a 25% increase in the amount of data being backed up, we will flag them. The next enhancement in 8.16 has to do with the query REPL failure. This is a new command which will list the client nodes that failed to replicate. And when you issue this query REPL failure, you'll get a source return code and a target return code in the output. And these are the return codes from the Spectrum Protect server. There are internal error codes, and they'll help us understand why that replication might have failed. You can issue this command for either a node or a group of nodes, and you can choose to either have just a summary of the failures, or you can see the individual objects that failed as well. The next enhancement to one of our commands has to do with the protect storage pool force reconcile equals yes. Prior to 8.16, if you ran this command and it was interrupted, the next time it ran, we would have to restart the whole reconciliation process between the Spectrum Protect primary server and target server. Because what this command is doing is it's going out and it's looking to see what has been replicated over to the target server. And if it happens that there's anything on the target server that's not stored on the source server, we'll delete it off of the target server. So as you can imagine, this reconciliation can take a while. And the longest part of this, in fact, 3/4 of the time spent, is just on the reconciliation. So now in 8.16 and above, when you run this protect storage pool force reconcile equals yes, we'll have a new internal table that will let us save the work that's being done during the reconciliation. So if that reconciliation is canceled, when it's restarted, we'll basically begin where we left off and just continue working from this internal table. The next feature in 8.16 has to do with endian backups and restores. In Spectrum Protect version 8.12 and 7.18, we introduced new security measures where we use SSL to encrypt the communication between the Spectrum Protect server and the clients, the Spectrum Protect server and the OC, the storage agents, and everybody else. Well, when we did that, we had to disable the ability to use our old web client. And this is because SSL could not be encrypted and secured using the old web client. Well, unfortunately, that web client was the only way you could perform GUI-based NAS endian backups and restores. This is for endian backup and restore, not your snapdiff, not your snap mirror to tape or any of those types of functions, but just your normal NDMP backups. So in version 8.1.6, we are adding to the native Java GUI the ability to do NDMP backups and restores, as well as monitor your NAS activities. So this will run natively on the same machines as the backup archive client, and the command line backups, like backup NAS or backup node, none of that's changed underneath the covers. All that's changed is that you can now do that from this native Java GUI. And so this native Java GUI is available on all the platforms where a NAS plugin exists, which are Windows, AIX, and Solaris x86. In order to set up this native Java GUI, first of all, you do have to set up NDMP. And NDMP backups can be set up to go directly to tape or to go over the LAN through the Spectrum Protect server and out to any of our storage pools that we support. So you set that up, then you're going to go and register and grant client access for the admin ID if that Spectrum Protect server is 8.1.2 or 7.1.8 and above. And basically you need to create an administrator ID that matches the node name where this GUI is going to run. And then you grant authorization to the administrator ID for the GUI node names, and you grant authorization to the administrator ID for the NAS node names, which is your data mover name. And so here's an example right here where we registered admin node 1, then we did the grant authorities both for node 1 and NAS node 1. Now, if you do have table of contents processing on, this native Java GUI will work with that, but you do need to make sure your talk processing is turned on and is working correctly. So now if you want to do an NDMP backup, you can simply go to the Java GUI, click on Actions, and click up Backup NAS, where at that point you can go down and select specifically what you want to back up. Likewise, when you want to go to restore a NAS volume or an individual file, you'll go to Actions, Restore NAS, click on the volume if you have table of contents enabled right down into the actual file names. If you want to monitor the NDMP operations, you'll simply go Actions, Monitor, IBM Spectrum Protect NAS activities, and that'll show you all running operations for those NAS, including NAS full backups or restores. You can also delete a NAS file space by going Utilities, Delete File Space NAS, and then check that specific file space. You will get a warning message because all backup data will be erased when you click yes to deleting out a file space underneath the Spectrum Protect server. The next enhancement has to do with Windows only and has to do with the GSKit that we use for SSL encryption of our communication. Previously, GSKit was installed as part of the API for Windows only. All the other platforms were installing it globally. So in 8.1.6, we're now able to also install the Windows GSKit globally. So the reason that's important is if various products are using GSKit, only the latest version of the GSKit will be installed, and then all the different products will be able to use that version. And so now when you go out on Windows, you'll see that GSKit under Program Files, IBM GSK8 directory. And this approach is advocated by the GSKit team. HSM for Windows. This enhancement is building upon an enhancement that was put in 8.1.4 that has to do with the way that we recall files. Prior to 8.1.4, when we did a recall of a file, we would create a temporary file and then restore that file to its original location. In 8.1.4, we changed the way that that was done and got rid of this temp file. This actually sped up the recall by about 50%, so it was a big performance impact. However, one thing we found out is that if the recall is interrupted, for instance by a network connection problem, then a partially filled stub file might remain in the file system. And that stub file uses more disk space than our normal 4 KB that we use for a stub file. So in 8.1.6, we look for any of these partially filled stub files and we actually clean them up and clear them out. And then we reset them back to the typical 4 KB size of a stub. Okay, with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Sean.
Hello, my name is Sean Sperry. In my part of the presentation, what I'm going to review is the updates on the right here, which is the Spectrum Protect for virtual environments, Snapshot for Windows, Snapshot for Unix, Snapshot Protect, Spectrum Protect for ERP HANA updates, which are coming in the 8.1.6 version of these products, released on 9/21/18. And I'm also going to go over in detail the enhancements we're going to be adding to version 10.1.2 of Spectrum Protect Plus, including the GUI enhancements, VSnap Encryption, DB2 Support, some various other miscellaneous enhancements that have come into the product. So let's start by taking a look at Spectrum Protect Plus version 10.1.2. The first interface the first enhancement I'd like to speak of, and probably the most notable, is the update to the user interface of Spectrum Protect Plus. Spectrum Protect Plus was designed to be a very simple product, and so from a menuing perspective and from a use perspective, it always has been pretty simple. But what we found through using the product over this past 8 months is that the menu selections at the top level can be made simpler and more intuitive. And so that is what we've done at version 10.1.2. We have added some features to the user interface to redesign the menus to make them more intuitive and even easier to use, and also added some features to the alerting and the dashboard to give you some ability to interact with the dashboard at the top level, so you could explore errors and alerts and also get a big picture of how things are running. So that is what we've done in version 10.1.2, and we're going to go over those now. First thing you're going to see is a rearrangement of the menus at the top level. Now what I've found is that this is indeed more intuitive, and once you dig down and if you are a previous user of the product, once you dig down and go into the menu, the selections are pretty much the same. But at the top level, we do have these new categories. And they include a dashboard, which gives you an overview of the way things are running. Information about jobs and operations, so the jobs and operations that are going on in the system. The protection, or the data backup and restore functionalities for both virtual machines and applications. System configuration information, so information about how the system is configured. Reports and logs, so the reporting and logging for the system. And finally, the accounts associated with the system, so the users that log on to Spectrum Protect Plus, association with Active Directory, and then the accounts that are used to log on to the virtual machines or the applications that are protected by Spectrum Protect Plus. Now, in addition to this top level menu, we've also added enhancements to this dashboard that should make it more intuitive and give you a bigger picture about what's going on in the environment as you're looking at the dashboard, and also allow you to drill down into the jobs that have run. So on the left you have the standard navigation menu that we have always had, a page header which kind of breaks information into panes that you can group things together with. The top section is going to give you information about job problems and historical running of the jobs in the system. So information about all the jobs, which ones were successful, which ones had warnings and which ones failed. Capacity issues in the dashboard, so information about what capacity issues you may have to address when you look at the system. And then finally up at the top, the little bell, which gives you information about alerts. So this is what we've called in the past our morning cup of coffee view, right? It's where you come into the system, you click on the dashboard, and you can basically see all the information about your system, what's working, what's not, what problems you may need to address in the environment, and start addressing those issues. Okay, so as you drill down into each one of these panes or section headers, you'll get further information about each of the information that they contain. So in this job status over time selection, you can get further information about each one of the jobs that have run in the system over a particular period of time. So you can pick your time, 12, 24 hours, 72 hours, etc. The failed jobs will be listed in red. The orange jobs or the warning jobs will be listed in orange, and the green jobs will be listed as successful, or the successful jobs will be green. You can move the timeline indicator to get further information about the particular jobs, and you can also select a particular job and see further information in the bottom about the warnings that are in the job, and also click to see a summary and view the information in the log for that job. So that way, if it's particularly an error job, you can go right to the log and look at the log and see what the error might be and correct the situation. Moving down through the dashboard, there is the capacity summary, and again, you can change the period for which errors are displayed, and you can select 12, 24, 72 hours. You can see a list of unavailable devices or full devices, and get further information about the errors that are occurring on those devices. Again, also further details on those errors. And then finally, information about the deduplication that you're achieving, the compression you're achieving, and the space available in VSnap storage. Finally, to go directly to the device list, you can click that View Backup Storage, and that will take you to the device list so that you could operate on the devices and see further information about them. Now, there has been a lot of requests for alerting in the Spectrum Protect Plus dashboard, and that is one of the information, and that is one of the things that we have added in 10.1.2. It's the first release to include this feature. And it really is very simple but very effective. Basically, you click on a little bell in the UI, and you will see a list of items needing your attention. It will bring that list to the front. You'll see a red number indicating that there are a certain number unacknowledged items, and you can either clear an alert or go directly to the log by clicking that View Log link, and it will take you right to the log, to the point in the log where the error is, so that you can investigate it and potentially correct it. Just digging down a little bit, you have the alerts list. You have the View Event Log selection, the Clear All Alerts, which will just clear all the alerts at one time. the ability to clear an individual alert, and then finally the view log, which will let you view the log associated with a particular alert, so the reason an alert was generated. Okay, so continuing with the features of Spectrum Protect Plus version 10.1.2, the next feature I'm going to talk about is VSnap Encryption. Beginning at, as you probably know, at earlier versions of Spectrum Protect Plus, we supported compression and deduplication on the VSnap repositories and servers, but we did not support encryption. And beginning in version 10.1.2, we do support now encryption. It is encryption at rest for the data stored in the VSnap repository, and we are using the 256K 256-bit AES encryption cipher. Now, just some restrictions and some information about using encryption with Spectrum Protect Plus. In order to use encryption with a VSnap repository, you must initialize the VSnap with encryption enabled. So you can't go back and turn encryption on an already existing VSnap. You have to start with it enabled. Now, as the first bullet at the top says, you can do it from the GUI at initialization. So at initialization of a VSnap repository, you can check turn on encryption, and the encryption will be turned on. But after the pool is created, it is either on or off, and you can't change it. All the disks, so no matter how many disks are in the VSnap pool, it is going to use the same key file, which is automatically generated as we create the pool. Now, if you go ahead and expand the VSnap pool, the Spectrum Protect Plus appliance will check to see if the pool contains an encrypted disks, and then the additional space in the pool will be encrypted with the new disks using the same key file as the existing disks. So all those new and expanded disks will be encrypted just like the others in the pool. I put on here, sometimes it can be useful to manipulate VSnap storage through the command line, through the Spectrum Protect Plus command line, and there is a set of VSnaps commands for doing that. And here you see a couple of the VSnap commands to create a pool with encryption enabled, or to enable encryption during initialization. Okay, moving on to the next feature of Spectrum Protect Plus version 10.1.2. As you probably know if you've been using the product, we support applications backup with Spectrum Protect Plus. And we continue to add to the list of applications that are supported. In previous versions, we supported SQL Server and Oracle, which are two databases, and now we are adding DB2 to the list of applications that we support. We are going to start out, at least initially, by supporting single partition DB2 databases. And what we're going to do, and the way this is going to work, is basically the same as all of the application and hypervisor support works with Spectrum Protect Plus. We'll register a machine and do automatic discovery of the DB2 installations. And then we'll do a snapshot-based online backup using DB2 ACS of the databases. Now, just like our other support for Oracle and SQL Server and the hypervisors, we have written a custom delta copying algorithm for data movement for snapshot to the VSnap repository. So basically we're going to do incremental forever, meaning the first backup will be a full, and thereafter it will be an incremental block level backup to create a snapshot that is fully restorable from each backup. Just like all of the other applications and hypervisors that are supported by Spectrum Protect, will allow you to do a production restore, that is, move the data from the VSnap repository back to the system where it was protected from, either to the original location or to an alternate location or alternate host. And we also allow you to do a test restore. And a test restore lets you go out and restore the data in place without actual data movement. So the data for the DB2 database remains on VSnap, but you can start up the database, run it, test it, do whatever you like with it. You can restore to an alternate instance or a database name, and like virtually all of our other support for our databases, we do allow you to pick up the transaction logs, or in the case of DB2, it is called an archive log. So we allow continuous archive log backup, including archive log truncation. Now, for restore, again, this is really going to align with SQL Server and Oracle, but the terms used by DB2 are slightly different, and what's available in the Spectrum Protect Plus system kind of aligns to what DB2 allows. So we let you do a recovery of the databases with transaction roll forward in the 4 different modes that you see described here. So number 1 is we'll put the data back but let you run recovery manually. So let you go into DB2 and use the DB2 commands to roll forward to a particular point in time. We'll also let Spectrum Protect roll forward, Spectrum Protect Plus roll forward to the end of backup, so it'll apply the online redo logs and then bring the database online. And then if you are doing transaction or archive log backups, we'll also let you recover to the end of the logs, and again bring the database online automatically, or recover to a particular point in time, which again applies the archive logs and stops applying them at a specific date to give you a consistent backup. We do support front-end capacity licensing with the IBM DB2. So if you're going to be licensing Spectrum Protect Plus by front-end capacity, you can do that, and we will give you some reports to show you the amount of data that you're protecting in the DB2 databases so that you can determine your licensing cost based on that. Some information about supported platforms. Basically, we're going to support DB2 version 10.5 and DB2 version 11.1, so those are kind of the latest versions, major versions of DB2 along with their fixed facts. At the moment, we do not support DB2 Pure Scale, and we do not support DB2 on GPFS or Spectrum Scale. At some point, that may be added in the future, but for today, those are not supported. And operating systems that are going to be supported today are Linux x86-64, so 64-bit Linux, and AIX on P-Series. Now, as always with the databases, it's really important that you review the system requirements online before you try this, because in virtually every database, Oracle and DB2 particularly, they support a lot of different configurations, and a lot of different versions out there, and they tend to be around for quite a while. So you want to make sure that you understand what the requirements are before you start trying to implement a backup solution. Now, there are some prerequisites for the configuration of DB2 when backing it up with Spectrum Protect Plus, and I want to go over those now. We've already talked about it, this first one a little bit, DB2 has to be configured in single partition database, so we don't support multi-partition versions of DB2 yet. That may be coming in the future, depending on development priorities. DB2 does have to be set up in recoverable mode, so that's really these logarch method 1 or 2 not equal to off, so you have to be in recoverable mode. The DB2 table spaces and log files must be separated from each other and on dedicated logical volumes that are managed by either LVM2 on Linux or JFS2 on AIX. So that is just so we can take the snapshots and freeze the file systems for completing the snapshot and a requirement of ACS. You can locate the DB2 local database directory either co-located with the table spaces or in an extra logical volume. So the database home directory can be in one of those two places. We do recommend that and require that the local database directory be dedicated to a single database. So foreign databases might be compromised on restores otherwise. So really you shouldn't mix these. And finally, we do require a minimum amount of free space on the file system, which is 10%, just to give us space to take the snapshot. Okay, so here's some pictures of the GUI, and these are really not that complicated. And this is, if you've used Spectrum Protect Plus at all, this works exactly the same way as it does with hypervisors or the other applications. It's just that the options you have with DB2 are a little different because DB2 is just slightly different than Oracle and SQL Server. So here you see us registering a provider, and we're giving it its name. And here you see two providers that are already registered. Just some information on how we do the backups. As I mentioned before, the first backup will be a full copy, and subsequent backups will copy only the delta. But when we store those, we'll allow each one of them to be restored independently. So we don't need to apply the full and then apply the deltas. It's just one independent snapshot for restore purposes. So each backup represents a consistent online snapshot backup that is driven through the ACS DB2 interface. They're stored within the VSnap repository, optionally with multiple streams. And we always back up the table space, the online redo logs, and the local database directory for the DB2 database. You can go in, once you've registered a system, you can then go in and either select to back up the whole instance or select an individual database in the instance for backup. Here you are, we're selecting the whole instance to be backed up, and here you can see this, the version of DB2 here is 11.1.2. You'll be able to either select options for the backup, which are stored with the individual objects, or pick an SLA policy, associate an SLA policy with the backup. Here we are selecting at the database level, and again, you're able to select an SLA policy or select options. Note that you have this eligible for log backup here. So this one we are able to do log backups and back these up. This one we're not. You can apply multiple SLA policies to a particular database, so this database has both the gold and bronze associated with it for backup. Here we are selecting an SLA policy for a database. Again, point and click. Nothing really complicated there. The only really interesting thing is the ability to apply multiple SLAs, just like everything else in Spectrum Protect Plus. Here we are picking the options, and there's only two. Enable log backup, which will pick up the archive logs and store them in the VSnap repository, or determine the number of multiple streams that will be used in the backup. As I mentioned a little earlier, you can restore the databases to the original host or interest, or to an alternate host with a new instance name or database name. We talked about these two test restore modes again, and this is just standard Spectrum Protect Plus stuff. Production, which actually copies the data back. Test, which uses the data in place in the VSnap repository. And then there's also this instant access mode, which is just a mount of the snapshot backup to the target machine so you can manually access it and do the restore. And again, as I mentioned a little earlier, these are just the standard recovery modes for DB2, and you have the option to either not do any from Spectrum Protect Plus and do it by hand, or to have Spectrum Protect Plus apply one of the standard recovery modes to the database once it's restored. Again, standard Spectrum Protect Plus screens, no different here. We're just picking the backup and expanding it. This little pointer takes the latest backup, and you can also expand out the list of backups and pick a particular backup to restore. Again, just standard Spectrum Protect Plus. You can select a site to restore from, so if you're using Spectrum Protect Plus replication, you can pick a particular site to restore from, maybe your primary or secondary location. Here are the options for doing restore. We talked about these already. It's just a picture of them. Restore to original instance or to an alternate instance, a production restore, and the recovery options that you are going to use. So here we are restoring to an alternate location, and as you can see, we have picked the alternate server to restore to, changed the name of the database that we are restoring to, and also we now have the ability to do an instant access and a test restore, and then run recovery as desired. Some notes on the additional options when you're doing a restore. First, you can overwrite existing databases using a check mark. You can specify the maximum number of parallel streams on the database, and you can also increase the increase the memory size, the memory set size for the database. Specifying 0 basically doesn't change that memory set size. Finally, just a note of caution on the overwrite option. If you're redirecting a restore to an alternate server, it can wipe the local database. It does wipe the local database directory. So it might compromise other databases sharing the same local database directory. So you want to be very careful when you use that option to an alternate server. We've already talked about this a lot, so I really won't belabor it, but the recovery options in Spectrum Protect Plus are really the same recovery options that you have in DB2. Spectrum Protect Plus allows you to either let you as the DBA perform the recovery manually, or it does perform the roll forward for you, and with the option of recovering to end of backup, which is recovering to the end of the online redo logs, or recovering to the end of logs, or a point-in-time recovery, which requires the archive logs and requires log backup to be enabled. This is just some settings of backing up the archive logs. Here you see enable log backup is checked. And again, this is just standard Spectrum Protect Plus information and the way it works. With Spectrum Protect Plus, you associate the options with the databases, not with the SLA policy. So here you see we are enabling log backup on a particular database. Here we are rolling forward to the end of backup on a recovery, and this is just the standard DB2 roll forward to the end of backup if you were to use the DB2 command. You can also, if you're doing recovery log backup, you can recover until the end of the available archive loads, and this is a screenshot of that. And again, this is just using the standard recover to the end of logs syntax with DB2. And then finally, the roll forward to a particular point in time. And again, this is just a standard DB2 roll forward command with the 2 timestamp parameter that you're using to roll forward the logs here. And you're just specifying that time in the GUI. Just moving on to front-end capacity licenses, there are a couple of reports that might be applicable with DB2. The first is the front-end capacity license report, which you see here, protected databases, and here you see a column that has been, or that is available, that gives you the front-end capacity for the databases. So if you are licensing by front-end capacity, you can get that information. The report would include all databases, but here we're only showing you the DB2 databases because that's all we have on the system. There is also a database backup history report, and again, we're only seeing the DB2 databases here because that's all we're showing, but this will give you the backup history of all of the databases that are being backed up on the system, so SQL Server and Oracle as well. Okay, that's it for Spectrum Protect Plus and DB2. Now we're going to move over to some miscellaneous additions and changes in version 10.1.2 that you should probably know about, and these are enhancements. First, the automatic VADP proxy update. We have enhanced Spectrum Protect Plus to now automatically update the VADP proxy. So when you update the Spectrum Protect Plus appliance, if there is a update for the VADP proxy, if you're using VMware backup, it will automatically be pushed there without any user interaction, again saving you time. Automatic VADP proxy throttling. Now we will use multiple VADP proxies to maximize data throughput if you're backing up VMware. And Spectrum Protect Plus will determine which VADP proxy is the least busy and has the most available memory for free tasks, and use that VADP proxy to do backups on VMware. So again, some changes to Spectrum Protect Plus to do things automatically to make it easier for the administrator to operate the system. We now have a new option to truncate Oracle source logs, and basically you see it down there, or truncate Oracle source logs after successful backup, and it deletes the older archive logs that are after a successful backup. We have changed an option on database backups to allow you to specify a maximum number of concurrent databases to be backed up simultaneously. And the reason we have done this is because we have experienced cases where a large number of concurrent database backups has impacted server performance. And so we've added this option to allow you to control the number of concurrent databases, to allow you to throttle the number of backups that occur simultaneously. And the default on that is 10, but we do recommend that you start at 1 and gradually increase if the databases are on the same LUN. Obviously, if the databases are on the same LUN, you're going to get some contention. So you probably want to start small and just gradually increase those to make sure you don't overwhelm the system. We have added a new feature that allows you to run pre- and post scripts from an application server or a dedicated script server. So with Spectrum Protect Plus, you can choose to run pre- and post scripts for doing operations. In a lot of cases, this is used to maybe quiesce the database for a particular backup, or perhaps to do some masking for a database clone or a database restore. And this is just a convenience feature that lets you store the scripts on a central server, so you can have everything all in one place together and update it all in one place. We've also changed the administrative account security in Spectrum Protect Plus. You used to set up the networking as root, and from a security perspective, we decided to enhance that. So we've created a new account on the Spectrum Protect Plus appliance and VSnap appliances called Server Admin. And that is the account that you will use to set up the networking, to do VSnap commands, and you can also sudo from that account to root if you need to do something that requires root access. Okay, and now we're going to just touch on the enhancements for Spectrum Protect for VE. Just remember that we are continuing to support Spectrum Protect for virtual environments for our existing customers who are running it. So we continue to do currency support and small modifications to the VE code to allow our users who are using Spectrum Protect for VE to use it to its full potential. Okay, so in version 8.1.6 for data protection for VMware, just some bullet points on the things that are adding or being changed. We now support vCenter 6.7 and VMware 6.7. We now support adding an individual VM to a schedule in the vSphere plugin as opposed to adding a folder. We now support complete configuration of the Windows and Linux data movers through the vSphere plugin. We support compression in NBD SSL transport using the VDDK. And we also support automatic balancing of virtual machines across multiple data movers associated with the same schedule. Previously, you used to have to go into the GUI and click order to do the rebalancing, and now that's done on an automatic basis. For data protection for Hyper-V, Spectrum Protect for virtual environments, we now support in-guest application protection in Hyper-V, similarly to what we do in VMware. It used to be that was supported only in VMware, but now it is supported in Hyper-V. And we support SQL Server 2014, 16, and 17, and Exchange Server 2013 and 2016. We now present certificate warnings when installing the MMC and opening the MMC. So it allows you to invoke the Microsoft Wizard for viewing and installing certificates, and that's just an enhanced security precaution. We've also added the ability to include and exclude disks on Windows 2012, and we've improved the documentation. Finally, just a couple updates on Spectrum Protect Snapshot and ERP. We now support SQL Server Snapshot cloning in Spectrum Protect Snapshot. So you can create a clone using the Spectrum Protect Snapshot MMC GUI. And we've also improved the GUI with other progress and informational messages to tell you what's going on. Finally, Spectrum Protect Snapshot for Unix. We now support with the dynamic target adapter for SVC. We now support vDisk mirroring. And in Spectrum Protect Snapshot for Oracle, we include the ability to include the online redo logs with database snapshot backup. We include snapshot offload to Spectrum Protect with RMAN to either use full or incremental backups. And then finally, if you're running SAP over Oracle, we now have a new wizard as opposed to a skip script-based setup. So that completes our discussion of Spectrum Protect Plus 10.1.2 and Spectrum Protect for VE and Spectrum Protect Snapshot version 8.1.6. I hope you found that information useful, and I look forward to talking to you at a future date.